Welcome back, everybody, to the Ryan Kai Show. It's been a while. Hope you had a fantastic 4th of July weekend and week. I know it's been a while, but we're back, and we're talking about NBA free agency again. So, Ryan, let's start off. What is new since we've been gone?
So, the biggest news out there is the Thunder's decision to move on from Carmelo Anthony. Whether that means they're going to stretch his contract out through waiving him, and then they'll pay it over 2 to 3 seasons. I don't remember which one it is exactly. Or they can trade him, but in that case, they would have to get another asset back. And the teams that they had as trade partners, such as like the Brooklyn Nets, and I think the other team was the Atlanta Hawks and the Bulls, they're all kind of low on cap space, so the only team that's left to make a deal, most likely, is the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, and being a Kings fan, are you excited at the prospect of potentially making some sort of move for Carmelo Anthony, or do you feel like that's the wrong type of move organizationally for the Kings?
Well, they won't retain him. Whoever trades for Melo, what will end up happening is they'll trade for Melo, give the Thunder a few pieces, and then they'll have to buy, like, the part of the deal would be to buy Melo out once he arrived in, like, for example, Sacramento. So if the Kings got him, they would have to waive him, or not waive him, but buy him out of his contract so he gets all his money that he wants. We are pretty much just getting the contract, and we don't get the player. We're literally getting assets for the contract. The Thunder would have to give us a few first-round picks or second-round picks or something like that, and then Carmelo would be free agent officially, and then he would go to the team of his choice, which, according to all the people, is probably the Houston Rockets, because Chris Paul's been kind of vying to have him join the Rockets after they've lost Trevor Ariza, and they also lost Luka Bahamute to the Clippers, which is also news that came out not too long ago. So, I don't know. I think that's probably the most likely, is just for the Thunder just to waive rather than them trading, because I think in order to trade, you have to take back bad contracts, so they're not saving as much money as if they just waived. They'd save $100 million off his $29 million that he's making if they just waived him, because all the luxury tax penalties.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not really I'm a fan of the Kings acquiring picks if it means taking on bad contracts, so I'm a fan of the idea, but I think they're a little too stupid to figure that out themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. When it comes to the Kings, that's a fair point. I mean, I'm interested by the idea of Melo going to the Rockets down the road once he eventually does become a free agent, because I don't know if that's the kind of guy you want on that team. As good as the Rockets were last year, and I get they lost a few pieces, I don't know if that adding Melo, if that necessarily improves the Rockets, or if it might actually do some damage having him there in the way that, the Thunder kind of were hurt by having him there.
Yeah, well, it's a completely different situation, and here's the reason why I believe that. Anyone who tells you that Westbrook is a better facilitator than Chris Paul is off their rocker. Insane. The best form that we ever see in Melo, that most people agree, is the Olympics Melo, when he played for the Olympics. And he completely went off ball, which people are saying, well, that didn't work for him last year. No, it actually did. His big drop-off on his production was not on off-ball. His off-ball shooting was at a career high at like 43% from 3 whenever he was off the ball. So it's not that's the problem. And that's exactly what the Rockets would need. The problem is he wasn't doing well when they gave him the ball at the top of the key to just set up a play. Like, he wasn't doing good, like, setting up plays and in ISO and in transition, which is normally what his thing is. That's usually why Melo's such a good player, which I 100% attribute to just not having shooters around him. Like,
right.
I think not having a threat, come on, who was going to shoot on that team? It's like that starting lineup consisted of Steven Adams, can't shoot. Andre Roberson, when he was healthy, can't shoot. Russell Westbrook, he's a great scorer, but I wouldn't call him an elite three-point shooter or a shooter.
He's a good shooter.
He's hot and cold though. He's not the greatest at times, and he can be like phenomenal at other times. I wouldn't call him consistent. So then you have Paul George, who's a great 3-point shooter. But those guys weren't really in the plays, and those two weren't playing off ball with Melo whenever Melo had the ball. It was usually Westbrook setting it up and then just dishing it to someone, and then they run an ISO play, which is not what Melo was doing good at last year. He was doing good as kind of just a 3 role. Now, he doesn't give you defense if you're the Rockets, and that's kind of a letdown.
Especially coming off of Trevor Ariza.
Yeah, so you'd probably have to run them Melo if you're going to get Melo. Run him with either Chris Paul or Harden, not the 3 of them at the same time. I would mostly say run Chris Paul with Harden or run Chris Paul with Melo. I wouldn't run Melo with Harden too much because I think having Melo, who's a bad defensive player, and Harden, who's a bad defensive player, on the floor at the same time and have really, really slow foot speed would really hurt their defense.
Right.
And also, from the Thunder's perspective, their best squad out on the floor last year was when they had Westbrook, Roberson, Paul George, and Adams. They were one of the best defenses in the league and one of the best teams in the league when they had that squad out there. Now that Roberson's coming back healthy, they re-signed Jeremy Grant and Nerlens Noel and all these guys, and they add Nerlens Noel and other guys. I think it would be better just to get a deeper roster and make your 2 pillars of the team Paul George and Westbrook. I don't think Melo's needed on that team. Whereas for the Rockets, I could see them adding Melo and him just being a great scoring option.
Yeah.
And that improving the team. I don't think it's going to be as bad a fit as people think. And the other option is he goes to the Lakers. I mean,
yeah, that's another possibility as well. And, the Lakers, I'm interested in one thing particularly with the Lakers, and that's them and the Luol Deng contract. Tell me a little bit more about that side of things, because that contract really bugs me if I'm the Lakers.
It's I don't remember the exact number, but I think it's around the range of like 18 to 20 million a year, and it's Luol Deng. They paid it to him that 2016 when I think they were still they were having a big dispute between the Buss family, and they had Jerry Buss was running it for a little bit, the brother of Jeannie Buss, and he was kind of in control for a little bit, and he decided to pay Miles Goff and Deng ridiculous contracts during that 2016 cap boom that happened.
Right.
Huge mistake in retrospect. It's kind of screwed the entire league because now the league is shuffling those contracts around, and like you can't move one of those contracts without receiving another one of those 2016 contracts.
Yeah.
But Deng's contract will have to be you'll have to get rid of it. The Lakers would have to give up a first round pick. I think the better option.
Well, my question is, do you think there's any chance that instead of waiting to acquire Melo in free agency, that they try to swap bad contracts and give the Thunder Luol Deng's contract in order to take on Carmelo's contract?
Why would the Thunder do that? Like it doesn't make sense for them to do that because
it's
Luol
cheaper.
Deng's $18 million compared to Melo's
27,
29,
something like
it's
that.
It's like, yeah, but Melo's makes $100 million cap hit due to luxury tax. Luol Deng's would be like what, like 70, 60? Still horrible. You don't want that. So what they'll probably do is just stretch it so that they can save the $100 million.
Yeah.
It's like, why would they take on $60 million for a bad player that wouldn't really help their team rather than just stretch it and save the extra $60, $50 million?
Yeah, that's a good point. That Luol Deng contract, and when we talk about these bloated contracts that came from that 2016 cap boom, it makes me think almost of like the 2008 financial crisis in the United States. It's like you've got all these, if you want to call them toxic assets or bloated contracts, whatever you want to call them, they're bad contracts, and it's just, it's crazy because it's like, when is it going to be like where you have so many of them that it's just going to be trouble for the league to try to get rid of them all?
I blame it's kind of off topic, but I kind of blame the players' union for why that cap boom happened like it did because the front office gave them a choice saying, hey, do you want to get all the money from this new TV deal and this new sponsorship deal and all this stuff in 2016's free agency, or do you want to spread it over the next 4 years? Now, I'm sure in the moment the 2016 free agents really wanted it to be available that 2016, and good for them, right? Like they just made a ton of money that they didn't deserve. Solomon Hill made like a $15 million a year contract or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah,
it's like, and who the heck is Solomon Hill? Like he isn't even. It's like, but like
that's a fair point.
No, he's like a third string forward for the Pelicans.
Point.
But I blame the players union. I mean, they could have spread it over the 4 years, which would have been great for these guys, because now the whole problem with free agency is that these guys aren't finding a market for themselves. Like Capella's fighting just to try and get a contract re-signed with the Rockets, and he's fighting for like $100 million, like what Steven Adams got when Steven Adams was getting re-signed, but the money's not there this year. That's why all these guys are getting kind of underpaid, and they need to...
Hey, think about it. Capella could make $20 million a year, and we just talked about Solomon Hill getting paid $15, and I mean, when you talk about the quality of the player,
not
there's
even
a
close.
huge difference there. And
and the Rockets need to re-sign Capella. It would be great to add Melo. I think it would improve the team, despite what a lot of people are saying about his defense. I understand that, but I think Melo would definitely improve the team, get them closer, fill in a big gap. I think they would actually be better than last year as a team, personally. Losing Ariza and losing Luka Bamute is definitely harsh, but I mean, they added James Inez, who's a good wing defender, and he's a good three-point shooter, so he kind of fits that system. And then Melo, I think, is, despite this, I don't know what happened when everyone's like, oh, one bad year in OKC and he's done. It's like he was a 25-point-a-game guy, 22, 23, all in New York, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, he had like a 16, 17-point-a-game season in OKC. He's done. Melo's over. It's like, maybe it just wasn't a good fit. Maybe he makes another resurgence in his career and goes back to high scoring with the Rockets. Who knows?
Melo is an interesting case because I don't know. I don't know where his career goes from here. And the question is, okay, if he goes to the Rockets and he fights for a championship with Chris Paul and James Harden, that'd be an interesting path for Melo because he hasn't really ever been the contender.
But he'll probably have to take a lesser role to do that.
And that's, I don't think a big problem for Melo. I think people blew up that him taking a lesser role in OKC was what he was most displeased with.
Well, he did not want to come off the bench, and he said he's not at that point in his career.
Yeah, and I get that because I don't think he's a bench-level player yet. And, I think he can produce at a starting level still. But Melo is a Melo guy, and I don't know if he's really got that drive to play in the Rocket system and really compete that way, or if he would be better off selecting a career path kind of along the lines of a LeBron James, where it's less about competing now and more about setting yourself up lifestyle-wise. Maybe he goes back to New York. Maybe he goes somewhere else where he feels like he can just enjoy the last few years of his career.
The other option on that point that has been discussed a lot is the two front runners, and LA's kind of taking the third place back seat. And the two front runners is one by a lot is the Rockets. Number two is actually the Miami Heat, which a lot of people think he could sign up the Heat because he'll get a starting role. He'll be one of the biggest scoring options on that team. Right. He provides the team with much needed scoring. It's more lax. He'll be a starter. He gets to play with Wade, who's a good friend of his.
Yeah, not expected to
be great.
A good team.
They could make the playoffs because they were a playoff team last year. They're in the East, which is weak. I mean, you never know. Some fun stuff could happen, but you're pretty much giving up on getting a title at that point. If you go with the Lakers or the Rockets, at least you have a chance to compete with a title in the next few years.
Right, and that's a good point. And it's interesting because most guys in Melo's position that are considered Hall of Fame level players that don't have championships and are, into their 30s, most of those guys would be really stretching hard to try to get to a team that they thought they could win a championship with. I don't know if Melo's necessarily that guy. He's a little different when it comes to that type of stuff. I mean, I don't think he doesn't want a championship. I think he'd want a championship if he can get one. But I don't think he'll, go through heaven and hell to get it. I don't think he'll stretch himself to try to get it. I think he'd rather do, whatever he wants to do.
Yeah. There's some other news I wanted to talk about today. I want to talk about some of the other moves that we didn't get a chance to talk about due to our absence. One of those deals is the Jeremy Lin trade, which was one of those 2016 contracts. He got traded down to Atlanta in exchange for some picks, second rounders, and then they also did. The Nuggets just made a huge cap clearance, which they then used to sign Isaiah Thomas, which is just insane to me that he did not find a market this year. I mean, it's so shocking because he went from number 4 in MVP voting to a minimum contract of like $2 million.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane to me.
It's pretty shocking how quickly his value diminished.
Yeah, within 2 years, it was over.
Diminished within the league. And look, I've never been really high on Isaiah Thomas and as a player. You know, I think he's shown some sparks of some real scoring ability, but as far as an overall player, I don't really think his value. I never thought his value was that high. But boy, I think I think his value is higher than a minimum veteran contract.
Well, I feel bad for him. He's like he did so much for Boston. He played through his sister's death. He fought hard for that team, hurt himself, fought through it for the playoffs, did everything for that team, and they got rid of him. And it's a business, I understand, but Cleveland didn't really give him a chance to come back, and then they immediately got rid of him for garbage. And we'll see how that paid off for Cleveland. Not very well, in my opinion.
He played okay with the Lakers.
Yeah, he did better with the Lakers coming off the bench and being. And I think that the role the Nuggets are going to try and implement him on too. They're going to make him come off the bench as a primary scoring guard because they've been lacking that guard help for a while. They wanted Marcus Smart last year.
Right.
The Nuggets. They went and got Devin Harris from the Mavericks.
Right.
I mean, they've been wanting that contribution at that guard position off the back. I don't think he's competing with the starting job. I think it's Jamal Murray's and Gary Harris's easily at that 1 and 2 position.
Right.
But I think that him coming off and providing scoring is a huge improvement of that team.
No, and I think he could definitely be a guy that we're talking about down the road as a potential 6th man of the year candidate coming into that type of role.
And it'll be good for him too because he'll get a better contract next year if he has a good season.
And that's the thing is that when we talk about how his value has dropped so drastically in such little time, a lot of it's circumstance, you know. Not necessarily that he was playing bad. He just was thrown into some really bad circumstances, getting traded to Cleveland and then getting bumped over to LA, and just the way things went.
Injuries kind of derailed him a little bit too.
Yeah.
I will say for the Nuggets though, it's for a team that's young and is trying to get into the playoffs. They've got a lot of talent starting to pile up. I mean, Jamal Murray and Gary Harris are one of the youngest backcourts in the league that I think have some of the most underrated. I think they were one of the best shooting backcourts in the league.
No, you're saying you don't think that Isaiah is competing for those jobs at all.
No.
Because it's very possible you could throw Jamal Murray into a 2 slot and then bring Isaiah at the 1.
Gary Harris is way more talented than Isaiah Thomas is.
Yeah.
And he's perfect for the system. They both play so well. Now, Jamal Murray and Gary Harris are going to be the starters. And then you got Jokic and Paul Millsap down at the forwards. And
really solid.
Yeah, and then you got rid of Wilson Chandler's contract, which you traded to the 76ers for a pick, a second-round pick. And then they also got rid of Kenneth Faried's gigantic, overblown contract, which for how little time they were giving Kenneth Faried and Darrell Arthur, they got rid of both their bad contracts. Had to give up a pick to get it, to the Nets, but it was worth it because they cleared a ton of cap space. And I think that pick's going to have not a lot of value. And now that they got Michael Porter Jr. and hopefully he can get healthy and prove everyone wrong to come into that forward position. They got some good forward help by re-signing Will Barton too. I think they're an up and coming young team to try and get into that Western Conference playoff picture.
Yeah, if that 3 position pans out, with
Michael
Porter and. I think that team is a really solid, well-rounded team. I don't know if they have the star power to compete, but they definitely could be a mid-level playoff team, a 5-6 seed, something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have Paul Millsap, who's who's a veteran, former All-Star, multiple-time All-Star. Jokic is an up-and-coming. He's gonna be an All-Star. He's an up-and-coming stud. Great, best passing big in the game, probably.
Yeah.
I think you look at like Murray and Gary Harris, both been the Rising Star Challenges consecutive years. They're both great scorers. They're both elite three-point shooters, and I think that they're in a system. I mean, the only thing they're lacking is defense.
Yeah.
And if someone can learn to play defense on that team, I think their comparison a few years ago was to the Golden State Warriors. That the system they play is very like that. It's very like that Warrior system. Right. Before they acquired Durant and when it was like Harrison Barnes.
And I think that's what they're missing is they're missing the elite scorer. They're missing someone who can be that guy that can really score for them because they've got some great pieces and Jokic is a pretty decent scorer. Jamal Murray's shown flashes.
Michael Porter or Jamal Murray or Gary Harris, one of those guys steps up, I think that team could get their elite score. They desperately need to really make a push.
No, definitely.
They got a good cast with some good depth, though, and I like the addition of Isaiah Thomas. I think it's a good addition. I mean, and cap space. Having an extra, like, $30 million cap space doesn't hurt either.
No, it doesn't. And, look, there's not much left in the market right now for them, I don't think, as far as what they could get with that cap space. But I think it's good to have that cap space moving into next year, and the potential to get someone down the road is always there.
So speaking of teams using cap space to go acquire players, my Kings tried acquiring Zach LaVine.
That was a good story.
Yeah, so my Kings had two targets primarily that were their primary targets, both of which they did not get, both of which went to the same team.
Shocker.
They were competing with the Bulls for their for restricted free agent Zach LaVine, who was, like I said, a restricted free agent. I mean, he is a good player, scoring, doesn't really play defense. He plays he can play about one or two. He plays better at the two. It didn't make sense for the Kings. I don't even know why they were targeting him, honestly. But the whole idea I got was that they were just trying to accumulate as much young talent as possible and then deal with how to reshuffle it later.
Right.
They offered him like $20 million a year for like 4 years, or like 3 years.
A lot more than what most teams would consider his value.
Yeah, across the league it was considered to be an insanely stupid contract by the Kings. But the Bulls kind of saved us by, accepting to match the offer, and now that he's going to be returning as a Bull. And then our second target, Jabari Parker, just recently signed with the Bulls. He was a restricted free agent for the Milwaukee Bucks, and after they've acquired Brook Lopez and Ilyasova at the forward positions, they really didn't have a place for Jabari Parker. They didn't really want to spend the money to re-sign him, so unless it was like a really low offer, they were probably going to let him go. And they did the good thing and just kind of worked with him and his agent to kind of release him. And he's going back home to his hometown of Chicago. It makes sense. He is again being overpaid a lot, $20 million a year for 2 years, with the second year being a team option. I mean, that's a good team friendly deal for the Bulls, but you better hope he doesn't have two ACL tears in the same knee at different times. Yeah, you better hope it's not like Derrick Rose 2.0.
Yeah, Jabari Parker's one of those people that there's a lot of question marks around him as far as his potential. I've always really liked Jabari Parker. I liked him since I watched him in college. And I think he's a fantastic player, but he does carry a lot of question marks into what the future holds for him. Something you brought up a while back when we were just talking, was that whole idea that maybe the Kings didn't really want Zach LaVine, but they were just trying to drive the market up by offering a really ridiculously high contract, knowing the Bulls would probably match.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a strategy that teams can use?
I think it's a strategy teams can use. I think it's a strategy teams do use. I think that multiple teams could do that. there was also this report out that the Kings may do it with Clint Capella, even though they really don't need Clint Capella in any way
Right.
to perform. But just to throw a contract at him that's high, because they know the Rockets need to resign. Like, the Rockets don't have an option. They need to resign Clint Capella. They're just like, they're
Right.
arguing
And
over a few dimes.
if the value is really high on him all of a sudden, but they still need to re-sign him, it really puts them in a tough spot.
Yeah, they would have to re-sign him. And if they don't, you get Clint Capella and you can trade him if you're the Kings. But...
And it puts the Rockets in a tough spot because if they drive the value up on Clint Capella, that hinders the chance that the Rockets have to go get Melo in free agency if he does.
Well, Melo
eventually
would just
become a free
resign
agent.
for like a veteran minimum of $4 million or whatever.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. Melo's a lot about his money.
Yeah, but he's still getting his money. That's how it works. When you get waived from a team or bought out,
Right.
they're still paying you the entire length of the contract or a big chunk of the contract. So, like, if Melo gets waived, he's going to get his $29 million stretched over 3 years.
Fair
2 years.
Fair enough.
And then he's going to get $4 million on top of that. So he's
Fair
making more money.
enough. But I think he'd go somewhere like the Heat where he could get 15.
Well, the Heat don't have that kind of money. Each team would be looking at that veteran minimum to try and sign him. But that being the whole thing about the Capella and the teams trying to raise the price on players like that, I don't think the Kings are doing that. And the reason I say that is because I think I'm a little bit of a pessimist in the fact that they're not smart enough to think of something like that. They're dumb enough to offer contracts to Zach LaVine for $60 million.
Because they actually want him.
Yeah, because they actually need him. And it's like, well, we have a bunch of guards, and the 2 guards, I mean, we don't really need them. Who cares? Throw the money at them. Stupid decision. I don't know. That sounds like too
I mean,
smart
they could have
strategy.
tried to force Zach LaVine to play a 3, but that's not really realistic.
No, I don't know. The Kings have been a little bit underwhelming on their free agents. But that aside, I think the teams that really have done well this free agency, I mean, the Bulls have overpaid, but they've got a lot of young talent added to the team this year for the Bulls. I mean, they re-signed Zach LaVine, who's the biggest part of that Jimmy Butler trade. And then they get Jabari Parker. They add a lot of depth. I think the Suns add some good pieces through the draft, and with Trevor Ariza signing, which was out of nowhere, and no one saw that.
Yeah, kind of a shocker.
Yeah. And
Didn't
then,
really see that one coming.
The Rockets have taken a big hit, and they better hope that Clint Capella accepts a long-term deal because they do not want Clint Capella to take his qualifying offer of like $4 million or $5 million and then be an unrestricted free agent next year and just go wherever he wants.
Right.
They don't want that to happen. I mean, well, there wasn't a lot of movement this year, and that's kind of my biggest complaint. Like, I was expecting like a big year, like Leonard to the Lakers, LeBron to the Lakers, Paul George to the Lakers. Like, everything is blowing up. Super team here. It's like new additions all over the league. Like, tons of moves.
I'm
like,
kind of
none it
glad.
really happened.
I'm kind of glad that a new super team didn't form, though. I mean, it would have been interesting, but I'm kind of glad that didn't happen. I'm kind of glad that the Rockets are seeming to have a few struggles in free agency because, well, one, I don't really know what the timetable for the Rockets' success is. I don't know how much longer they can be a successful team. You know, when you think about Chris Paul's getting older, you know, they're having issues already re-signing some of their pieces. You know, I don't know how much longer that team's necessarily got the build to be super successful and have a run at championships, if it's 2 or 3 years, or if it's 5 years,
I
1 year.
I think their window, they picked the wrong time in my mind because their window is about the same window that the Warriors have to still be dominant. It's about that same 2, 3, maybe 4 if they're lucky. They can keep some guys going. But I think the biggest problem with the Rockets is that they're getting a little too stingy. And they said they're not trying to be stingy. But I think the biggest problem with teams is that they get a little too stingy on paying a guy an extra few $1 million that they lose that guy, and then they lose the opportunity to stay relevant. You only get a short window to be good.
Right.
And if you don't give everything to that cause, you're going to end up being really obsolete really quickly.
Yeah, and that's what I see, not maybe this upcoming year with the Rockets, but I don't see them being the team that they are right now in 2-3 years. I think their window's short.
Their number 2 option, and even that contract they offered Chris Paul, like it was a contract like 2 years of production and then 2 years of maybe not liking the contract so much. Anything after the next 2 years of the contract are just butter because I mean Chris Paul is getting old and it's going to start showing very quickly.
Right. Well, we'll wrap it up there for today's episode. Again, welcome back. We're going to be doing our show again on a regular basis every day of the week, half an hour. So please come back and join us. If you like this video, give it a like. Make sure you subscribe. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we'll see you next time on The Ryan Kai Show.